From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Tuesday, November 7th. It was the deal of a century, because when Elon Musk finally bought Twitter for a whopping $44 billion a year ago, and this came only after months of drama and waffling and a lawsuit, it ushered in a new era in social media. A self-confessed free speech absolutist, Musk said that he wanted to create a digital town square. So has he? And if so, who's populating it? Today, business columnist Stephen Bartholomeusz on what has arguably been the worst financial deal of the century and what Elon Musk has in store next. So, Stephen, it's hard to believe that it's been a whole year since Elon Musk stormed into the Twitter headquarters with an actual porcelain sink in his hands, which was marking his takeover of the social media platform. So much has happened since then. So can you take us back to that day when it was announced that Musk had taken over the platform? Why was it such a big deal?
I think it was because Twitter was quite unique. It was the big social media platform for the more sophisticated users. So it was, unlike, say, Facebook, it was very much a platform of ideas and discourse. And so I think Elon Musk in particular, taking control of it, was a big deal for all those people who used it, who tended to be somewhat left-leaning, tended to be part of the intelligentsia, and were vitally interested in political ideas. And I suppose that's what made Twitter quite special, because it was really a forum for quite political ideas and dialogue. Okay, and we know that Elon Musk made a lot of changes in the last year. So can you take us through some of the big changes that we've seen on the platform and the broader social and even political repercussions that have come from those changes? The first thing to address is, why did he buy Twitter? I think it's a mixture of his kind of libertarian views, which can be a bit chaotic at times, but they're clearly libertarian in character. Hubris, he's definitely got that. He's anti-woke, and in fact has said quite clearly that one of the motivations for buying Twitter was he thought it was becoming too woke, and had a mainstream of views on it which jarred with his own.
There was basically oppression of any views that would even, I would say, be considered middle of the road. But certainly anything on the right. I'm not talking about like far right.
And he wanted to address that. And so he had the money and he bought it.
Old Twitter was fundamentally controlled by the far left.
And it's not just propagating the mind virus, but suppressing any opposing viewpoints.
Yes. Well, in order for the virus to propagate, it must suppress opposing viewpoints.
The biggest change, and the one that had the most impact on Twitter and its value, was Musk deciding to open the platform back up to a host of people, some of them high profile, some of them very ordinary people, who'd been banned from the platform.
Elon Musk has reinstated former President Donald Trump to Twitter.
Nearly 2 years after he was kicked off the platform following the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
Hundreds of Twitter accounts belonging to far-right activists and QAnon theorists have been reinstated, according to data reviewed by NBC News.
If you remember, Twitter had a very large group of people who managed the content and managed off-the-platform content that was involved hate speech or disinformation. Musk, who's a libertarian, decided to open it up to everyone. And so we've seen a tide of people who've previously banned come back onto the platform, a significant increase for those who measure it in hate speech and disinformation.
Researchers found a dramatic 202% rise in tweets containing anti-black slurs, a 58% rise in tweets with anti-gay slurs, and a 60% increase in anti-Semitic tweets. At the same time, Twitter ended its own policy against spreading disinformation.
It's become much more raucous and more of a cacophony of voices than it used to be, and it's become much more right-leaning in some respects than it used to be. And that, of course, does have implications for the nature of political discussion in the States. And I think it hardens the existing political convictions of people who use what's now X, and widens the political divide between the various groups in the states. So the US could be characterised as politically dysfunctional at the moment. Massive divides between the various groups in society, and I don't think X is helping that at all.
And so you've just written about how this has arguably been possibly the worst financial deal of the century, this purchase of Twitter, now X, of course. So how much money did Elon Musk and his investors actually lose?
A lot. He paid $44 billion a year ago for a business that was barely profitable, which is why I think when he came to terms with Twitter's finances, he tried to walk away, got hauled into court and was forced to make the offer. Almost immediately, because of the changes he made to Twitter and the nature of the new users who came onto the platform, he started losing his advertisers.
Twitter hit another low over the weekend. Elon Musk says the social media platform is still seeing a negative cash flow because of a 50% drop in ad revenue. It comes as Meta...
So he's lost about $2.7 billion of advertising. And Twitter only had $4.5 billion a year to start with. So he's lost about 2/3 of his advertising revenue. And that was 90%. Advertising revenue was 90% of Twitter's revenue base. So basically, it's the core of Twitter's financials. He's tried to replace that with subscription revenue. So he's got about 1.2 million people paying, it used to be the little blue mark next to their name, verified users. They're paying $8 a month. But that means that's a bit over $100 million a year of revenue. So it doesn't come close to touching the size of what he's lost. When he made the bid, there was his equity, so about $23 billion of equity. He raised about $7 billion from friends and external investors and had $13 billion of bank debt. One of those external investors was Fidelity, a giant US fund manager. They recently wrote down the value of their holding by 2/3, which would imply that X is now worth only $15 billion. He paid $44 billion. Fidelity says it's only worth $15. Last week, as part of the employee share scheme that X has, Elon, or his managers, put a $19 billion valuation on it. So whether it's 15 or 19 or somewhere there or thereabouts, it's been a financial disaster. To lose that sort of money in just over a year is extraordinary.
And it's not just Elon Musk and his co-investors who are hurting. So who else is suffering financially as a result of this deal?
His banks would be feeling very, very uncomfortable. Got a consortium of quite large banks who funded this acquisition. Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, some big French banks, some big Japanese banks, a few others. Normally, when banks fund a leveraged takeover, and this was a leveraged takeover, they very quickly syndicate their loans. They sell it down to a range of other investors and usually the bond market investors. In this instance, because it became clear so quickly that Musk had overpaid and was damaging the business in the process, they weren't able to sell down their exposures. So you've got banks sitting on $13 billion of debt that they know if they try to sell down, they would lose money. The best estimate at the moment seems to be that they would lose at least $2 billion if they tried to sell that debt today. And they have been actually taking soundings to see whether they can do it. So presumably that means that they've either marked it down in their own books or they're prepared to take their haircut. But certainly those would be big losses for the banks to take on a single loan.
And what did Elon Musk actually do to make the value of this platform plummet so fast and by so much?
By introducing a bunch of users and a whole lot of content that advertisers do not want to put their ads next to, hate speech, tweets or whatever X calls them now, from Nazis, the sort of the violent speech. So extremism in all its forms. No mainstream advertiser, and Twitter used to have some very mainstream advertisers, wants to be next to anything which would hurt their brand. And there's a lot on X today that would hurt an advertiser's brand. He destroyed the revenue base, and his attempts to create new revenue bases have been less than successful. So it's the character of the platform that's changed that has actually demolished the value. Normally you have long lead-ups to implosions, but I can't recall off the top of my head one where within 12 months so much value has been destroyed, or one where it was obvious that value was going to be destroyed from day one. So that makes it very unusual and possibly unique, which is why I'm fascinated by it, because as a business journalist, you don't often see this kind of stuff happen in such a short space of time.
Stephen, I want to ask you about Elon Musk's plans for X. By some estimates, he has lost $28 billion. And yet, just recently, he laid out in a company meeting that he wants to feature a payment service for employees on the platform. He's actually promised that users will be able to, quote, conduct your entire financial world. So can you tell me about that?
Way back when he was involved in the startup of PayPal, Musk had this idea for what he now calls an everything app. So something similar to, for instance, China's WeChat, where you can do just about anything you want to do on it. He got pushed out of PayPal, partly because he was so aggressively promoted this idea of an everything app. And he even back then registered a trademark for X.com. So he's had this idea in the back of his mind for a very long time. And the idea is that what he was talking about last week was initially a financial platform, so a payments platform, one which would offer credit, savings, loans, securities transactions. It would do all those things. Anything to do with money, he said, would be on the platform. You wouldn't have to do it, go anywhere else. He also talked about competing with LinkedIn, Amazon, YouTube, again, all the big tech companies, all the big social media and fintech companies. X apparently is going to compete with the universe of what they do and produce. It all sounds a bit fanciful, and you've got to wonder whether it would actually work in anywhere outside China, for instance, because in most developed markets, most developed economies, they have very sophisticated financial systems with a whole bunch of trusted institutions providing their financial services, to take the fintech bit of it. I mean, would you put your money with Elon Musk or the Commonwealth Bank? I know what I'd do.
And so is there any indication that he's actually going to go ahead with this idea? I mean, from the outside, it'd be hard to understand why someone would think, yeah, he's just lost $28 billion, but I feel safe putting my money with him.
Well, he says he's going to have it all in place within 12 months, which sounds maybe a little bit ambitious, given that he's got very few staff to do all this stuff now. He started, Twitter had 7,500 staff when he took control. It's got 1,500 at most today. So he would have to vastly expand the resource base that X has if he wanted to even do half these things. But he's an unusual character, and if you look at some of the things he's done in his life, you'd say you couldn't completely rule out his ability to actually create the platform, and neither would you rule out the ability of, or the willingness of some of those people who follow Musk, and he does have some quite loyal followers, to give him their money. You're right. If you look at his experience at Twitter, why would you hand over your savings? But then look at Tesla or SpaceX, and you'd say he's had some big wins along with this particular big loss.
True, but it's not just money that he wants people to trust him with. He also is planning on providing dating services and job recruiting on the platform, which, not casting any aspersions here, but Elon Musk has had, I believe, multiple partners. He's got all kinds of children with lots of different people. And hey, I guess if that's your goal, then absolutely. But is there anything to suggest that people would also really want to go to X for these things?
Given the way you just described it, maybe he would be, his expertise could be brought to bear on a dating service.
Because he's been so successful at it.
Well, he's had a lot of experience anyway.
Yeah. You don't think perhaps the fact that he's the world's richest man has any bearing on that?
It might have a small part to play.
A small part to play. And so I guess, what does Elon Musk care about, do you think? Because I know he told an audience at TED Talk last year that Twitter or X wasn't a way to make money, and he didn't care about the economics at all. So what is behind this goal of his to expand X and compete with YouTube, Google, Amazon? Do you have any idea?
If you look at a lot of what he's done over the last 12 months, he switches from one idea today, to another one tomorrow, to another one the next day, as if there's so many ideas bursting out that he can't help himself. He just sort of vomits them out. And they're talking about all sorts of things. Until they've actually done it, you won't know precisely what it is they've got in mind. You get a sense of the shape of what he's talking about, but in terms of what they will actually offer and how it'll be built, and who will use it, and how effective it will be relative to other alternatives, who knows?
So it's almost like this is the billionaire's version of, like, if you go out with a couple of mates and you're having a good night and you have like a fanciful idea of some amazing thing you want to do and you jot it down on a scrap of a napkin. This is like his version of it. It's just that his might sink tens of billions of dollars, but it's just whatever.
Yeah, and after you've had quite a few beers, right? Exactly. And then you look at the napkin in the morning and think, what the hell's that?
Right, except when you have, tens of billions of dollars to deal with, you can actually go through with that. Thank you so much for taking us through this.
Thank you.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Julia Carr-Katzel, with technical assistance by David McMillan. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.